want you to do something for me right now. Don't look at your phone. Don't look at the screen. Just feel the weight of the device in your pocket. Or maybe it's sitting on the desk next to you, vibrating phantomly.
Right.
It's humming, isn't it? Metaphorically, at least.
Yeah.
We're swimming in this absolute soup of data right now.
Swimming is a polite way to put it. I'd say we're practically waterboarding ourselves with information at this point.
Yeah, exactly. It's overwhelming. You have the sum of human knowledge in your pocket. You have AI completing your sentences before your neurons even fire the command to type. It's this constant low-level radiation of connectedness. And the question everyone asks is this actually good?
Or more specifically, is this breaking us?
Right. That's the nagging fear. I catch myself forgetting phone numbers I used to know by heart, like my best friend's number, my parents' landline from 20 years ago, or getting incredibly frustrated when a website takes 3 seconds to load, and I wonder, am I getting stupider?
Yeah.
Is this limitless connectivity making me a genius because I have access to everything, or is it making me intellectually atrophy?
It's really the defining debate of our generation. But here's the thing. Usually when we talk about this, we stop at the hardware. We talk about the screens, the blue light, the dopamine loops. We focus on the device itself.
Which we are going to talk about today because I have a serious bone to pick with my GPS.
We definitely are. But we're going to go deeper because our deep dive today has a two-part mission. Part one is the hardware. Is the tech making us smarter or lazier? We're looking at the research on cognitive offloading, the exocortex, and the death of deep reading.
But then, and this is part two, this is the part that actually kept me up last night reading the briefing material.
So close for it.
The code running inside the machine. We're going to look at language itself. Does the grammar you use, the actual structure of your sentences, program your reality?
Right.
Like, does a person who speaks Mandarin experience time differently than I do? Does a Russian speaker physically see the color blue differently than I do?
It's really an investigation into mental architecture. If the brain is the hardware and language is the operating system, well, how much of your personality and your intelligence is actually just the software you were installed with at birth?
I'm telling you, the stuff in our sources about the compass language in Australia, I will never look at a map the same way again. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the immediate threat, the rectangle in my hand.
Let's do it.
So I have the stack of research here. And to be fair, we had to start with the optimistic view, the case for smarter, because it is so easy to be cynical about screen time. But if you zoom out,
the barriers to entry for high-level information have effectively vanished. They are gone.
I was actually trying to explain this to my nephew the other day. I told him, look, in 1990, if I wanted to understand quantum mechanics, I had a 3-step process. 1, drive to the library. 2, pray they actually have the book. 3, pray the book isn't checked out by the one other nerd in town.
And step 4, hope you can understand the dense academic prose without a professor to guide you. Because if you got stuck on page 12, that was it. Game over. You had no recourse.
Right. You just sat there in confusion. Now, I type quantum mechanics into a search bar, or I go to Coursera, and I can watch a lecture from a Nobel laureate today for free.
It's the democratization of expertise, and the sources make a key distinction here. It's not just access in the passive sense, it's about the granularity of the access.
Break that down a bit. What do you mean by granularity?
Well, think about MOOC's massive open online courses. Platforms like edX or Khan Academy, we aren't just talking about, quantum mechanics for dummies articles. We are talking about the actual syllabus from MIT or Stanford.
Yeah.
You can be sitting in a rural village in the mountains, and provided you have a connection, you are sitting in the same virtual lecture hall as a kid paying $60,000 a year in tuition.
That's the whole Library of Alexandria argument. But here's my pushback. Does access equal intelligence? Because, I have a library card and I have access to a gym, but I don't live in the library and I certainly don't look like a bodybuilder.
Fair point.
Just because the lecture is there doesn't mean I'm absorbing it, right?
Access is potential energy. Intelligence is kinetic. But the research shows that for the people who do engage, the search engine feedback loop creates a completely different kind of cognitive capability.
The curiosity loop.
Right. There is this myth that Googling something is cheating. That if you don't know the answer off the top of your head, you don't really know it. But the sources argue that search engines allow for just-in-time learning.
Just in time, like supply chain management.
Exactly like that. Imagine you are reading a complex political article. You hit a term, let's say Keynesian economics. In the pre-internet era, you might just skip it. You rely on context clues. You get a fuzzy, maybe 60% understanding of the sentence.
Because I'm not going to get up, go find the encyclopedia, look it up, and come back. The friction is just too high. I just guessed.
Precisely. You settle for ambiguity, but now you highlight the word, right-click, define, boom. You get the definition in 0.4 seconds. You integrate that new packet of information, and you keep reading with 100% comprehension. You haven't just cheated. You have maintained the fidelity of the information flow.
So the technology essentially removes the friction of ignorance.
That is a beautiful way to put it. It removes the friction of ignorance. And this creates a self-directed learner. You aren't waiting for a teacher to curate the curriculum for you. You are the driver.
Yeah.
You find a paper on gene editing, you don't understand the statistics, so you watch a YouTube video on the stats, then you go back to the paper. You are weaving your own tapestry of understanding.
Which requires a specific skill set, though. You have to know how to weave. You have to know which YouTube video is garbage and which one is legit.
Which is a digital literacy skill we will get to.
Yeah.
But assuming you can do that, you are essentially building an exocortex.
I love this term. It sounds like a villain in a Marvel movie. I am the exocortex.
It really does,
Yeah.
but it's actually a formal concept from cognitive science. It stands for external cortex. The idea is that we are integrating these digital tools into our cognitive stack to the point where they function as a literal extension of our brain.
This is all the productivity stuff, right? Like Notion, Obsidian, Evernote, the second brain movement.
It is, but don't just think of them as fancy to-do lists. Think of them as extraneous cognitive load managers.
Okay, we need to define that. Extraneous cognitive load. Because I feel like my mental load is pretty heavy most days.
So your brain has a working memory, the RAM, if you will. It is extremely limited. You can hold maybe 4 to 7 items in there at once. That's it. Right. If you are using that precious RAM to remember to buy milk, email Sarah that the meeting is at 2.
Right.
And where you put that PDF, you are burning energy on very low-value tasks.
But idling the engine.
You're clogging the filter. The exocortex, the app, takes that load. It holds the schedule. It organizes the PDFs. It remembers the milk. This frees up your biological RAM for the high-value processing. Synthesis, analysis, creativity.
So I'm not dumber because I can't remember my schedule. I'm smarter because I don't have to remember my schedule. So I can think about, I don't know, the geopolitical implications of the schedule.
Theoretically, yes. This is the argument for cognitive augmentation. You are a cyborg. You plus the phone is smarter than you naked.
Naked metaphorically, please.
Usually, yes.
There's a specific application of this in our notes that I found really fascinating regarding language learning. Because usually people think tech kills language skills. You hear it all the time. Kids these days can't spell, they just use emojis.
But look at the tools like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid. The skeptics say these are crutches. The research suggests they are actually real-time feedback loops.
How so? Because sometimes I just click accept all and I don't even look at what it changed. I just want the red squiggly lines to go away.
Well, that's the lazy usage. But if you actually engage with it, imagine you write a sentence. The AI highlights it and says, this is passive voice. It weakens your argument. Try this active verb instead.
That's a writing coach.
It is. And it's instantaneous. In a traditional classroom, you write an essay, you hand it in, you get it back 2 weeks later, covered in red ink. By then, you've completely forgotten why you wrote it that way in the first place. The learning loop is broken. With the AI, the feedback is immediate. You see the pattern. Oh, I overuse the word very. Oh, I tend to write run-on sentences.
You internalize the rule.
You internalize the pattern. Eventually, you stop making the mistake before the AI even catches it. That is learning. That is augmentation.
It connects to the global connectivity piece, too. The world is shrunk idea.
It has completely collapsed.
I remember when I was trying to learn French in high school. I had a textbook from 1985. The people in the photos were literally wearing bell-bottoms. The dialogue was, "Where's the library?" It was so sterile.
It was a dead language. It was a specimen in a jar.
Right. Now, you jump on Hello Talk or Tandem.
Yeah.
You are FaceTiming a guy in Lyon. He's 20 years old. He's smoking a cigarette. He's using slang that isn't in any textbook on earth.
You're getting pragmatic competence. You're
Yeah.
hearing the prosody, the rhythm, the cultural context. You simply cannot get that from a book.
And it goes beyond just chatting, right?
Mm-hmm.
The sources mention citizen science.
This is really the peak of the smarter argument. Platforms like Zooniverse or GitHub, you have teenagers in Brazil collaborating with engineers in Germany to write code or classify galaxies.
Wait, classify galaxies. People do this for fun.
Literally, yes. Zooniverse crowdsources data analysis, NASA dumps massive images of deep space, and regular people learn the specific scientific criteria to classify them. They are learning the highly specialized vocabulary of astrophysics just to communicate with the community. They are forced to be precise.
Well, the tech forces a higher resolution of communication.
Exactly. If you are submitting code on GitHub and your documentation is sloppy, the code doesn't get merged. The system demands clarity. So you have this entire generation of people who are learning to think in systems, in logic, in precise commands because the machine demands it.
Okay, so that's the utopia. We are augmented, efficient, connected, self-directed super learners. We are walking around with an exocortex that handles all the boring stuff so we can classify galaxies in our lunch break.
That is the case for the defense.
Right.
There's always a but.
I feel a butt in my bones. Because for all that access, for all that potential, I mostly just scroll Instagram. And I feel like I can't remember how to get to the grocery store without a blue line telling me where to turn.
And that brings us to the prosecution. The case for lazier.
The term here that actually scared me is cognitive offloading. We talked about it as a benefit, freeing up RAM. But there's a dark side.
The dark side is atrophy. Cognitive offloading is defined as relying on external tools for tasks the brain could do itself. Now, if you offload the schedule, fine. But what happens when you offload the navigation?
The GPS.
The GPS effect is one of the most robust findings in this field. There was a famous study on London taxi drivers, the knowledge study.
Oh, I know this one. They have to memorize every single street in London, right?
Every street, every landmark, every possible route. It takes years of intense study. They drive around on mopeds with clipboards for months. And when neuroscientists scanned the brains of these drivers, they found that the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for spatial memory, was physically larger. It was denser.
They built a mental muscle, like doing bicep curls.
Literally. The gray matter physically increased. Now, compare that to the average GPS user. If you follow the blue line, you stop paying attention to landmarks entirely, you stop building the mental map, you are just blindly following turn-by-turn instructions, turn left in 200 feet.
I've done this so many times. I've driven to a place 5 times with my GPS, and on the 6th time, if my battery dies, I'm completely lost. I learned absolutely nothing.
Because you were in passive reception mode. You weren't engaging the hippocampus at all. And the fear is, if we do this for everything, if we do it for math, for spelling, for historical facts, do our brains physically shrink? Do we lose the neural density because we just aren't doing the reps?
Use it or lose it.
It's basic biology. The brain is an efficiency machine. If it doesn't need to maintain a pathway, it prunes it. It's called synaptic pruning.
So by using Google Maps, I am effectively pruning my own ability to navigate. That's terrifying.
You are outsourcing that function to the cloud, and this connects directly to Daniel Kahneman. We have to talk about System 1 and System 2 thinking.
This is the thinking fast and slow guy.
The Nobel Prize winner, yes. He posits that we have 2 modes of thought. System 1 is fast, intuitive, automatic. It's 2 + 2 = 4. It's recognizing a face. It's driving on an empty highway.
Low energy, easy.
Yeah, very low energy. Then there's System 2. This is slow, effortful, logical. It's calculating 17 times 24. It's parallel parking in a tight spot. It's reading a dense philosophical text.
It hurts. It actually feels like work.
It physically feels like strain. Your pupils dilate, your heart rate actually goes up. Now, here is the problem. Tech companies. They are in the business of removing friction. They want everything to be System 1.
One click buy, swipe left, autocomplete.
Exactly. They want you to flow. They don't want you to stop and think, because if you stop and think, if you engage System 2, you might close the app. So we are constantly being nudged very gently into this vegetative System 1 state.
And the result is that we lose the ability to trigger System 2 when we actually need it.
We lose the stamina for it. It's like being in a wheelchair when you have perfectly working legs. Eventually the legs get weak. We see this clearly in deep reading.
This is the skim and scan habit.
Have you tried to read a novel lately? A real dense Victorian novel, or even just a long magazine article?
Honestly, it's hard. I get 3 pages in and my thumb starts twitching. I'm looking for the notification drop down. I feel this restless energy.
That is your brain looking for the dopamine hit of a new input. Digital reading is F-shaped. Eye tracking studies show this over and over. We scan the headline, we scan the first 2 bullet points, and we leave. We are just hunting for keywords.
We aren't reading, we're data mining.
We are processing information, not contemplating it. And deep learning real wisdom requires contemplation. It requires sitting with a sentence that confuses you and wrestling with it.
Which brings us to the translation apps. This was the specific case study that made me feel so incredibly guilty.
It's the perfect example of offloading. You are in a foreign country. You see a menu. You hold up Google Lens. It translates the text instantly. You order the chicken. Result achieved.
Success, I got fed.
Functional success. Cognitive failure. Because you didn't have to decode the syntax. You didn't have to wonder, is this a verb or a noun? You bypassed the struggle completely, and the research is very clear on this. The learning happens in the struggle.
It's what they call desirable difficulty.
That's the exact psychological term. If it's too easy, it doesn't stick. If you take the helicopter to the top of Mount Everest, you got the view, sure, but you didn't become a climber.
And now we have the helicopter on steroids. ChatGPT.
The copy-paste mentality.
This is what really worries me about the next generation. If I have an essay due on The Great Gatsby, and I tell the AI, write me 500 words on the symbolism of the green light, and it just does it. Great.
You have produced a product, but you have skipped the process entirely. Writing isn't just about the output. Writing is thinking. When you write an essay, you are forcing your messy, chaotic thoughts into a linear structure. You are organizing your mind. If you outsource the writing, you are literally outsourcing the thinking.
So we end up with a world of people who can produce infinite amounts of content, but can't structure a coherent argument in their own heads.
That is the dystopian vision, yes. A world of prompt engineers who can ask for things but don't deeply understand how they are made.
And what about the originality issue? The sources touch on this too.
Well, these AI models are predictive engines. They output the most likely next word based on massive datasets. By definition, they revert to the mean. They produce the absolute average of human thought. If we all use them to communicate, we flatten the curve of human creativity. We all start sounding exactly like the algorithm.
So we have a choice. We can be the architect of the exocortex, or we can be the victim of the atrophy.
That is the synthesis. It's all about intentionality.
So how do we actually fix it? I'm not throwing my phone in the river. I need it for work. I need it to live.
No, and you shouldn't. The tool is incredibly powerful. But you have to treat it like a power tool. You don't leave a chainsaw running on the kitchen table.
Mindful tech use. It sounds like a corporate buzzword.
It does, but let's make it practical. It's about blended learning. Use the app, but then put it down and write the words by hand.
What? By hand, specifically?
Hand-eye coordination engages completely different motor pathways in the brain. It deepens the encoding. Use the flashcard app, sure. But then turn it off and try to explain the concept out loud to an empty room. Force the retrieval.
And set boundaries.
The Pomodoro technique is a lifesaver here. 25 minutes of deep work. No phone, no Wi-Fi, no tabs. Pure System 2 thinking. Then 5 minutes of System 1 scrolling as a reward. You have to train your attention span like you train a muscle.
Digital literacy. It feels like we need to teach this in kindergarten now.
It's the new fundamental literacy. It's no longer just reading words, it's reading sources. Who wrote this? Who funded this? Is this a peer-reviewed study or just a rant on a blog?
Being a smart consumer of information makes you a better producer of arguments. Instead of just absorbing, you learn to say things like, while some sources claim X, peer-reviewed studies suggest Y.
Exactly.
So the verdict on part one is, the tech can make you smarter, but only if you are willing to do the work to make sure it doesn't make you lazy. You have to be the pilot, not the passenger.
Precisely. You have to drive the car or the car drives you.
Okay. That is the hardware. That is the external brain. Now, I want to pivot because we talked about the danger of everyone sounding like an algorithm, but that assumes we all think the same way to begin with.
Which we absolutely don't.
We don't. And the reason might be the actual words we are speaking right now.
Now we are getting into the matrix.
Part two, the software. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. If you're listening to this, prepare to have your mind a little bit blown.
Buckle up. This is one of the most controversial and fascinating ideas in the entire history of linguistics.
So lay it out for us. Define it. What is Sapir-Whorf?
It's named after Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf. There are two main versions. The strong version is linguistic determinism. This is the idea that language cages thought. That if you don't have a word for a concept, you literally cannot think it.
Which sounds terrifying. Like George Orwell's 1984, Newspeak. The whole idea that if you remove the word freedom from the dictionary, people can't want to be free anymore.
Right. And for the most part, modern science completely rejects this strong version. We can obviously think about things we don't have words for yet. That's exactly how we invent new words. If you see a new color, you see it, even if you can't name it.
Okay, good. So we aren't robots programmed entirely by the dictionary.
No. But the weak version.
Linguistic relativity.
Yes. Linguistic relativity suggests that language influences or nudges thought. It doesn't determine it, but it heavily biases habits of mind. It makes certain things easier to notice or remember. And this version is supported by a massive amount of modern evidence.
Okay, let's get into the examples because this is where it gets really interesting. Let's talk about time.
This is a classic example of how grammar orients reality. Let's look at time perception. How do you, as an English speaker, visualize time? If I asked you to draw a timeline right now.
I think of it as a line, a horizontal line across the page. The past is behind me, the future's in front of me. We literally say we look forward to the future. We put the past behind us.
Right. It's linear and horizontal. But take Mandarin Chinese. While they use horizontal metaphors too, they also rely heavily on vertical metaphors for time. The word shang, which means up, can refer to the past, and xia, which means down, can refer to the future.
So the past is up.
Yes. Think of it almost like a stack of papers or water falling. The past is piled up above, and the future is down below, waiting to be added. Now, skeptics used to say, that's just a metaphor, right? Just words.
Right. Just because they say up doesn't mean they actually think up in their brain.
But cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky did this famous experiment. She showed Mandarin speakers and English speakers visual cues, some horizontal, some vertical, and then asked them rapid-fire questions about time.
And what happened?
Mandarin speakers were significantly faster at processing time questions when they were primed with vertical visual cues. English speakers were faster with horizontal ones.
Wait, so the language metaphor actually changes the physical processing speed of the brain?
It changes the cognitive architecture. It suggests that because the language lays out time vertically, the brain builds a vertical mental scaffold to handle time concepts.
That is wild. It's like their operating system has a completely different file structure for reality.
It gets even stranger when you look at the Hopi language. Now, this is the historical debate Worf started way back when. He claimed Hopi treats time as a cyclical process rather than segmented units. They don't chop it up into countable seconds and minutes like we do in English.
I've heard this is pretty controversial, though. Our sources make sure to note that.
It is deeply controversial and debated by linguists to this day, but the core idea that grammar can shift, whether you see time as a ticking clock that can run out or a flowing river, is incredibly powerful. If your language doesn't have rigid tenses the way English does, do you stress about the future as much?
It really makes you wonder. But if you want a real aha moment, one that I still honestly can't wrap my head around, we have to talk about space. The Gugu Yimithir people in Australia.
This is my absolute favorite example in all of linguistics. It completely shatters our assumption that left and right are universal human concepts.
So in English, we use egocentric coordinates. Left, right, front, back. Everything is relative to my body.
Right. The cup is to your left. If you turn 180 degrees, the cup is now to your right. The world revolves around you.
But in Gugu Yimithir,
they use cardinal directions, north, south, east, west. And they use them for absolutely everything.
Everything, like pass the salt.
Yes. They wouldn't say pass the salt to your left. They would say move the salt a bit to the north-northwest. Or the ant is on your south leg.
The ant is on your south leg. Think about the raw processing power required for that. That means to even speak the language, you have to know exactly where north is every single second of your life.
Precisely. You have to run a background process in your brain constantly updating your orientation. If you walk into a store, turn a corner, go down an aisle, you have to know you are now facing east, or you literally cannot speak a grammatically correct sentence.
If you lock an English speaker in a windowless room and spin them around, they lose their orientation instantly. We have no idea.
We are entirely helpless. But if you do that to a Gugu Yimithir speaker, they can usually point north without a moment's hesitation.
They have a human compass built into their brain.
They do. And it's not because of biology. It's not a genetic mutation. It's because their language requires it. The software of the language forced the hardware, the brain, to develop a superior dead-reckoning navigation system.
That is the ultimate proof of use it or lose it or, I guess, need it and build it.
It shows that language can force a cognitive habit that becomes almost a superpower.
Let's move to something we see every day.
Yeah.
Color. Because I always assumed biology is just biology. My rods and cones work exactly the same as a Russian person's rods and cones.
Biologically, yes. but the brain categorizes what the eyes see based on vocabulary. This is called lexical specificity. The rule is, if you have a word for it, you see it faster.
And the famous example here is blue.
Right. In English, we just have blue. We can say light blue or dark blue, but they belong to the same overarching category. They are all blue. In Russian, there is no single word for blue. There is siny, which is dark blue, and goluboy, which is light blue. To a Russian speaker, these are as fundamentally different as pink and red are to us.
They're completely different categories in their mind.
Yes. And in laboratory experiments, Russian speakers are significantly faster at discriminating between shades of blue when those shades cross that linguistic boundary when one is siny and one is goluboy.
So they literally see the difference faster simply because they have a specific label for it.
The label acts as a lens. It sharpens the visual distinction.
That makes me wonder what I'm missing out there, because I just don't have a word for it. Am I walking through a blurry world?
In some ways, yes. If you were a painter or a fashion designer, you would have much more vocabulary, azure, cerulean, indigo, and you would actually see more nuance in the world. Language trains the eye.
What about grammatical gender? This one is really weird to me. A bridge is a bridge. It's concrete and steel. It doesn't have a gender.
In English, no, it's an it. But in German, die Brücke is feminine. In Spanish, el puente is masculine.
Okay, but does that actually change how they see the bridge? Or is it just a rote grammar rule they memorize in school?
Believe it or not, yes, it changes perception. In the bridge experiment, researchers asked speakers to describe a bridge. German speakers, who have a feminine grammar structure for it, used words like elegant, fragile, slender, beautiful.
And the Spanish speakers?
Spanish speakers, whose grammar classifies it as masculine, used words like strong, sturdy, dangerous, towering.
Stop it. So the arbitrary grammar rule is painting the personality of an inanimate object.
Subconsciously, yes. It applies a filter. The grammar nudges the association. It's not that a German person literally thinks a bridge is a biological woman, but the associations of femininity in the broader language bleed into the perception of the object.
That is unbelievable. It means we are assigning personalities to furniture and infrastructure based on a coin flip of grammar history.
And then there is evidentiality. This is the Turkish example from the briefing.
This is one I strongly wish we had in English, especially on social media.
In Turkish, the grammar requires the speaker to indicate how they know something right there in the verb suffix.
So you can't just casually say, he left.
No. You have to conjugate the verb to indicate, I saw him leave with my own eyes, versus, I heard from someone else he left, versus, I inferred he left because his coat is missing from the hook.
You have to cite your sources in the grammar itself.
Every single time you speak, you cannot state a fact without simultaneously stating the provenance of the fact.
How does that change a culture?
Well, the insight from the experts here is that it might create a baseline culture of information sourcing and skepticism. If you are forced by your mother tongue to constantly clarify, I saw this versus I heard this, you might be much more attuned to the reliability of information.
Whereas in English, we can just declare it happened.
Yeah.
Nobody knows if we saw it firsthand or read it on a bathroom wall.
Exactly. English makes sources optional. Turkish makes them mandatory. Imagine if our news headlines had to use a specific verb tense that meant we are just guessing this happened.
The world might be a significantly calmer place.
Yeah.
It really is the software of the mind. Let's talk about culture and emotion, because this is where language feels the most personal to me.
Language carries culture. It's not just a neutral code. Look at cultural metaphors. In English, we constantly say, time is money.
We spend time, we waste time, we save time, we budget our time.
It creates a culture of extreme efficiency and anxiety. We treat time as a highly limited resource sitting in a bank account. Contrast that with the Spanish concept often associated with mañana. Now, we have to be very careful not to stereotype here.
Right, we're not saying everyone is taking a siesta and ignoring the clock.
No, absolutely not. But the linguistic signal reflects a different cultural discourse on urgency. Or look at the Inuit snow terms.
The famous 100 words for snow.
The exact number is heavily debated. Linguists constantly fight about what technically counts as a word, but the fact is they have incredibly high lexical richness for it. Slushy snow, hard-packed snow, falling snow. Why? Because survival depends on it. The language trains the eye to see environmental nuances that you or I would totally miss. We just see white stuff. They see safe to walk on or will collapse under a sled.
And then there are the untranslatable emotions. I love these so much. I feel like I genuinely need these words in my life.
These are beautiful. Schadenfreude in German. The joy in others' misery.
We've all felt that, but we just feel guilty about it in English. Germans just went ahead and named it.
Mono no aware in Japanese. The sadness at the impermanence of things, like cherry blossoms falling. It's a very specific, sweet sadness.
Saudade in Portuguese. That deep, melancholic longing or loss for something that might never return.
And hygge in Danish. Cozy contentment, wool socks, a fireplace, hot cocoa.
But here's the real question, though. Why does having a word for hygge matter? Can't I feel cozy without knowing the Danish word for it?
You can, but Lisa Feldman Barrett's research on emotional granularity suggests that having the specific word actually helps you regulate the specific emotion.
Name it to tame it.
Exactly. If you just feel bad, that is incredibly vague. It's hard to fix bad. But if you can identify, I am feeling toska, which is a Russian word for a sort of spiritual anguish, without a specific cause, you can understand it better. You have a higher resolution map of your own emotional landscape.
So if I know saudade, I can identify that complex feeling instead of just broadly feeling sad.
Precisely. You stop fighting the vague feeling and start understanding the specific nuance of it.
That connects right into reasoning styles, too. Holistic versus analytical thinking.
This brings us back to sentence structure. English is SVO. Subject, verb, object. The dog chased the ball. It heavily focuses on the agent, the dog, and the object, the ball. It is highly analytical.
We break the scene down into its component parts. Who did what to whom?
Chinese, broadly speaking, is much more context dependent. They might say something closer to inside the pond, fish swim. It focuses on the relationship, the background environment. It is holistic.
So one sees the fish, the other sees the aquarium.
In a way, yes. There are actual eye-tracking experiments where they show people a scene of a fish tank. Americans tend to remember the biggest, fastest moving fish. Asians tend to remember the background, the rocks, the bubbles, the watercolor, far better than the Americans.
Simply because the language trains you from birth to look at the context, not just the individual actor.
Exactly.
This all makes the multilingual brain sound like an absolute superpower.
It really is. The bilingual advantage is very well documented in the literature.
What's physically happening in the brain of a bilingual person? Because my brain just hurts when I try to remember my high school Spanish.
That hurt is the workout. It's executive function. If you speak two languages fluently, your brain is constantly suppressing one to speak the other. You have to actively inhibit cat to say gato. That is a heavy, constant workout for the prefrontal cortex. It's like a gym for your attention span.
And that leads to this idea of cognitive reserve.
Yes. Ellen Bialystok's evidence suggests that lifelong bilingualism delays the onset of dementia symptoms by up to 5 full years. The physical damage to the brain might still be there, the plaques and tangles of Alzheimer's, but the mind keeps functioning longer because it has built these robust backup networks.
That is incredible. So learning Spanish isn't just for travel, it's literal health insurance for your brain.
It is highly neuroprotective.
And it gives you metalinguistic awareness. You suddenly understand that your worldview is just one of many possible lenses. You realize, oh, I think this way because I speak English, not because it's the only objective way to view the universe.
It creates deep cognitive flexibility.
So looking at the future of all this, where is this going? Because we have AI entering the chat in a massive way now.
That is the big unknown. Well, interacting constantly with AI, which uses a very standardized algorithmic form of language, flatten our cognitive diversity.
If we all start talking like ChatGPT, do we lose the saudade and the hygge? Do we lose the ability to see the South Lake ant?
That is a very real risk. We might move toward a sort of global English or a digital Creole that is highly efficient but emotionally and conceptually shallow.
Oh.
Or do social media and global internet slang create a totally new hybrid cognitive style, a fast-paced digital way of thinking that we can't even predict the contours of yet?
It's a lot to process.
It really is.
Okay, let's synthesize and wrap this up. We've covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the glowing phone in our pocket and ended up mapping the neural pathways of the human brain.
The grand synthesis from our sources is this. Technology gives us unprecedented access to the world. It's the hardware. It can absolutely make us smarter if we use it for self-directed learning and augmentation, or lazier if we just offload everything to the cloud. But language. Language defines how we actually see that world. It's the software. It filters our time, our space, our colors, and our logic.
And the final provocation for our listener today.
The choice is ultimately yours. Will you passively let tech make you lazy and let your native language bias you unknowingly? Or will you use tech intentionally to challenge your brain and maybe learn a new language to expand your cognitive toolkit?
Audit your own habits. That's what I'm taking away from this deep dive. I'm going to go learn a word for an emotion I've felt but never understood.
I highly recommend Tosca.
Yeah.
Russian, look it up.
I will do exactly that. And to you listening, thank you for diving deep with us. Go check your phone settings, maybe turn off a notification or two, and think very carefully about the words you use today.
Stay curious.
See you next time.